Hey everybody, this is Ryan Bouse with the Abolitionist Society of Chicago. This week, another article was posted up by a pro-life group, again blasting AHA, trying to discredit and, in some aspects, I would even say slander the abolitionist movement. Now, of course, we know that the pro-life movement is doing these things because they're threatened, because we're going to steal their funding. I mean, to be completely honest, in all truth, we're stealing their funding away. Because if abortion is abolished, they don't get paid. And so we've all seen these big campaigns that run up and they want to stop the work that abolitionists are doing. They want to remind their special followers and their donors about how bad we are. So this article covered two different things, but the one was just, back to the usual, and it's back to this same straw man argument that pro-lifers have been using from the beginning against AHA and against the various abolitionist societies. And it's this idea that our immediatism and our stance against their incremental legislation is somehow a bad thing. They have this grand idea that what they're doing is good and noble and righteous and godly, and it's going to abolish abortion. And us standing against 20-week bills and pain-capable bills and parental consent bills is us being evil and us trying to keep abortion legal and things of that nature. And so this is an argument that most of us have seen many, many times over. And I just wanted to cover something. There's this idea that says that we hate all forms of gradualism. The claim is that we want all or nothing. And this is, of course, a fallacy. We recognize that all or nothing is an insane approach to things. We do want all, and we refuse to compromise on our way to all. But we understand that steps have to be taken. That's why we have a 7-stage plan. That's why we still go out and minister outside of the abortion clinics, trying to save individual babies. However, when it comes to the gradual and incremental laws, legislation, and bills that are being passed by the pro-life movement and celebrated by the movement, there really comes three main issues that I personally have and that most of the other abolitionists would agree with as being really the big three problems with these legislations, and the reason that as a God-fearing Christian, I cannot endorse them or join them in pushing or celebrating these bills. Now, the first is its historical futility. Just today, there was a video that I saw that Abby Johnson and a few other big pro-lifers were a part of down in Texas. And they made this video and they pointed out the amount of times between the 70s, 80s, 90s, and the 2000s where a pro-life bill was passed and then it was destroyed. And it was passed and it was destroyed. Some of these bills got passed and shut down twice in the same year, according to this video that they're putting out. And they lamented with it. But then they go and they try and pass the same bills again. You see, these bills are fruitless. They're a fundraising campaign for both sides of the issue. The pro-abortion cause makes millions of dollars because they're fighting those evil pro-lifers. And then the pro-life movement makes millions of dollars because they're pushing this legislation. And a whole bunch of people are making money. And there's a whole bunch of laws being passed hands back and forth. And a whole bunch of victories going back and forth. And in the end, 3,500 children are being murdered every day. In the end, 55 million children have been murdered on the back of this back and forth game that's been played. And so if there's a law that's being put into place that has a historical track record of being squashed within a year of its being passed, why would I ever endorse that? We've seen dozens of those laws here in Illinois. We've seen them in Texas. I believe it was Arizona recently that had a big pro-life bill that got passed and they all celebrated, and now it got shut down because the Supreme Court ruled against it. And part of that on the same ideology here, on the same mentality here, is that these bills are bound to fail because the bills themselves contradict themselves. And that gets into my second point, and that's the hypocritic wording of these bills and legislations. You see, you have a bill that says it's illegal to kill a baby until they're 20 weeks old. Or it's illegal to kill a baby after they're 20 weeks old. It's okay to kill a baby until they're 20 weeks old. And see, it feels real good to say, way to go, you've saved some babies, you've taken a step. But then you have to read the bill itself, not just look at what Abby Johnson, not just look at what, AUL or Jill Stanek or whoever is putting up and talking about how it's this big victory, but go and read the legislation yourself. Something my father taught me when I was very young and I hold on to this day is the idea that I don't sign my name to anything until I've read it. Now, this is a good practice in business. This is a good practice when you're making a big purchase. This is a good practice when you're signing a marriage agreement. And this is a great practice when you're signing your name to legislation, to laws, to the things that are going to control our nation or our state. And so in the 20-week bill in Texas, it says it's illegal to kill your baby after 20 weeks. And it specifically states in there that the bill was written in such a way not to revoke a woman's right to choose an abortion. So you see, your bill says it's wrong and it's illegal to kill your baby, but at the same time we recognize that it's a woman's right to kill her baby. Now, a house divided cannot stand. That's God's word. And these bills divide within themselves. There's a bill in place, I believe it's in Wisconsin, that says that there's this restriction on abortion. And it also puts into place in the wording, in the fine print, it says that irregardless of what laws are put into place, a woman will always have the right to an abortion, as long as it's within the state's laws. Now, so let's say Roe v. Wade gets overturned. This means that it's still legal to kill your child in the state of Wisconsin. Because the law books state that no matter what happens, it will always remain a right. So now, before you can criminalize abortion in the state of Wisconsin, you have to throw out the pro-life bills that these pro-lifers fought tooth and nail and donated hundreds of thousands of dollars to get passed. Hypocrisy. When I read through the scriptures, I can't find any place whatsoever for hypocrisy. In fact, I find the exact opposite. I find let your yeas be yeas and your nays be nays. See, it's been said that if so many people could show up and vote for a 20-week bill, why don't those same people show up and vote for absolute abolition? Why don't they vote for a personhood amendment when instead these same pro-life groups stood up and publicly joined forces with the abortion industry to oppose a legislation that would make it completely illegal to have any abortion whatsoever? See, they said it was because not enough support would show up, but then when they pass 20-week bills, they get all the support they could need. So it's obvious that it has nothing to do with the support, and it probably has more to do with the fact that they have a job to do. And if they lose that job, their family goes hungry, because they've created their own industry, their own corporations to fight abortion. Now, the last point that I want to touch on is something that it drives me crazy. To be honest, I sometimes have to back away from a conversation when I hear a pro-lifer try and use this justification, because it shows the historical revisionism that the pro-life movement has been so filled with, and it shows the ignorance of people who are willing to believe anything as long as somebody that they support said it. And so there's this idea, people say that William Wilberforce, the man who truly was the forefront and I would say the greatest force behind the abolition of the British slave trade. And they say that he supported gradual abolition of slavery. And now there's two reasons that they say this. The first is because there is writings in place where he did support the colonization movement. Well, it's true, he supported colonization. He did so before he became an abolitionist. He did so when he was, against slavery but trying to be politically expedient. And then he had an awakening in his life, and he realized that it was wicked and evil to follow the colonization programs. He realized that it was a failed attempt at justifying racism while making people feel better about not owning human beings. And so he publicly repented. In his writings, he has said that he was wrong. In his writings, he has called out and condemned the idea of colonization. So yes, just like I once was a pro-lifer, I supported parental consent parental consent bills. I supported 20-week bans. I supported pain-capable bans. I thought that these were good things. I stood up for them. I supported them. I publicly endorsed them. I voted for them. And I've repented publicly of doing so because I was being wicked. I was denying the laws of God. And so on the other part of Wilberforce, you see this idea, because Wilberforce did not fight to abolish slavery, or at least that's the impression that is given. See, Wilberforce did take an incremental approach. Wilberforce first fought to destroy the slave trade, the industry behind slavery. You see, he recognized that if it was illegal to buy slaves, then you would now have to treat your current slaves better. You would now have to recognize that you need to pay them, that you need to feed them, that you need to clothe them, give them property. Because you could no longer buy a slave. So the day that they ran away, or the day that they were worked to death, or the day that they got injured, you were out of work. And he was right. By destroying the slave trade, he created an environment where slaves started to become free men. And slaves started to get paid for their labor. They started to receive rights. And they received those things because there was no longer new slaves to buy. The problem is that destroying the slave trade and making abortions safer are not the same thing. In fact, they're on the polar opposite. So I want to compare some of this legislation. If in America today they passed a law that said that it was illegal to make a profit off of abortion, that would be a comparable bill. Not an exact bill, but it would be comparable. It's illegal for you to make money off of abortion. Or better yet, it's illegal for you to be paid, period, for your abortion. That would be a good, gradual bill. It's one that would destroy the entire abortion industry because it would no longer be an industry. It would be dead. Now, instead what we have is we have bills that say it's illegal to kill your child after 20 weeks. Well, it's illegal to own a slave over the age of 40. Because at the age of 40, they become persons. Or it's illegal to purchase a slave over the age of 16. Because that's when they really start to think for themselves. It's illegal to get an abortion without your parents' permission. What if there was a law that said it's illegal to own a slave unless your local pastor signs off on it? Seeing as half of the American church in the South was completely pro-slavery and the rest was completely apathetic and silent on it, that would have passed and people still would have been able to get slaves. What if we look at the bill that says that your abortion has to be, or your abortion clinic has to be clean and it has to pass a special certification and your tools have to be super clean and you have to have admitting privileges in a hospital? This is the equivalent of saying you have to give your slaves 3 meals a day and put a roof over their head. You can't make them sleep outside and you can't starve them. They have to have 3 solid meals a day. They're still a slave. It's still wickedness. But hey, we're going to make it a little bit nicer for them, right? Now, we'll go to the last one, and my personal favorite, the pain-capable bills. It's legal to kill your baby as long as they're not feeling any pain. Well, it's legal to own a slave. You're just not allowed to whip them. Or it's legal to whip them, but the rod can't be over 3 feet long. You see, it's lunacy when you compare it to anything else. The problem here is that the reality is that in order to justify these bills, you have to deny the fact that they're truly 100% human. You pass a bill that says that it's okay to kill a 6-week-old fetus. Or, sorry for the pro-choicers out there, a 6-week-old embryo. The problem is that 6-week-old embryo is just as human, just as filled with the image of God, just as beautiful and precious and deserving of life, liberty, and happiness as a 21-week-old fetus is. Unfortunately, the pro-life movement seems to disagree with that because they're not worth saving. See, in order to claim that you're fighting to end abortion, you actually have to fight to end abortion. In 40 years of pushing regulation and limits, nothing's happened. The numbers have stayed. Women are still murdering their children. In fact, in some places, it's gotten easier for them to do so. There's a problem when we sign a bill that says it's okay to kill your child when. And you may say that that's not what you're saying, but the world sees what you're saying. And the world understands that if you say it's wrong to kill a baby after 20 weeks, that means that it's right, it's acceptable to kill one before 20 weeks. And that if it's wrong to kill a child who can feel pain, it must be okay to kill one that can't. This is abolition, is standing against these bills. If you were to try and pass a bill that did not throw children under the bus, did not go with the masses in following evil, that actually would work towards abolishing abortion, not regulating it and cleaning it up, we would support you entirely. The problem is that we are not in the day and age of William Wilberforce and Frederick Douglass. We are not in the Garrison age. We are in modern America. And the trade does not work like the slave trade did. We can't make the trade illegal. The only thing we can do is make the act unthinkable. And so that is what we fight to do. Because you can put up all your laws, but there will always be the opposition, and there will always be those who go against it. But abolition recognizes that before it can be made illegal, it must be made unthinkable. Before it can be made a crime, it must be recognized as sin.